All right, hello everyone. So today we're going to look at Gantt charts. What is it? What's the history behind it? And how are we going to use this for our projects? So let's talk about it, a brief history. So there's a gentleman many years ago, Henry Lawrence Grant, and he's an American mechanical engineer and a management consultant. And so even though the Gantt chart's named after him, technically the first Gantt chart was developed by somebody else, by this gentleman here, Carroll, who's a Polish engineer who was around in the mid 1890s. So even though Gantt charts are named after Henry Gantt, the first Gantt chart technically comes from somebody else, a Polish engineer, Karol there. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. And he's in the mid 1890s. And so he invented what's called a harmonogram. And this is able to increase output by 100% or even 400% for different things in a factory, such as metal when you're rolling mills or machine shop, chemical plants, agriculture, and mining. And so eventually Henry Gantt created this version of the Gantt chart in the 1910s, just about 15 years after Carroll did it. And so Henry Gantt is considered the forefather of industrial efficiency through scientific analysis because he removes chance and accidents, very strategic and methodical about how he planned everything out. And he even came up with this wonderful system to give bonuses to managers on their ability to improve employee performance. So he called this the task and bonus system. And so nowadays we call it getting bonuses. All right, so now let's look at what is the Gantt chart. So it's a tool to show a project's timeline, the tasks, the status, and the milestones. Now the overall goal in a good Gantt chart. Now the overall goal in a good Gantt chart is you want to show the project timeline and all the tasks from start to finish or cradle to grave. Now the Gantt charts, they follow sort of this waterfall project management approach, and this will become clearer as we discuss. So if you imagine there's a waterfall there, and so the water starts at the top, it's going to flow down to the bottom. But the water can also split into different channels and rivers. So you could have some big task one at the top of the waterfall. Eventually it can flow down to task two, and then up to however many tasks you have at the bottom. Okay, so let's go over some key terms. So when someone says I have tasks in parallel, you have two rivers or like two tasks flowing next to each other. So this means you can do more than one task at the same time, right? So if you have two rivers, the water's going down, right? So the idea is you can do two things at the same time. There's also a series, so things are flowing in a sequence, so one flows after another. This one, you cannot do things at the same time. There's also interdependent tasks, so they flow from or to each other. Okay, so if there's a floating task, that means it doesn't have interdependencies. So the arrows of how these waterfalls connect to the next river and go downstream. So it's bad to have floating tasks. You always want to have the arrows to connect the tasks. How one task flows to the next task. How to have that water sort of like paper trail. And also this concept of buffer time. You want to include some extra time just in case there's some emergency, there's a delay, there's some obstacle, some unfortunate and unforeseen event. And so we'll go into some good practices for how much buffer time you should have a little bit later. But the most important key term is the critical path. This is the path of all the tasks that's going to take the longest to complete. So here I have drawn two different paths. We have tasks 1, 2, and 3 at the top. We have tasks 4, 5, and 6 on the bottom. And then time is marching forward to the right. So of these two paths, task 1, 2, and 3 at the top, or tasks 4, 5, and 6 at the bottom, which one is going to take longer? Well, obviously the bottom one, right? Tasks 4, 5, and 6. These three tasks are going to take a total of 40 days to complete, while tasks 1, 2, and 3 will only take 20 days to complete. So you'll be done with tasks 1, 2, and 3 before you even start task 5 around the same time task 5 starts. So the critical path here in this case is tasks 4, 5, and 6, 40 days, assuming that task 1 and 4 can start at the same time. That's why they're on the far left there. Okay, now let me give you some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. So generally, you want to have at least 1 month of buffer time for every 3 or 4 months of the project you have. That's just a general rule of thumb that I've come up with. You can change it, be more flexible, but generally, I think this is a pretty good rule of thumb. You also want to show where today is, but in your Gantt chart. We'll get into what this means in example when we look at how do you create a Gantt chart for creating a peanut butter jelly sandwich. It's important because this will show you how much tasks are done at this point in time, where today is. Another important tip and trick is you want to discuss your plan and strategies, especially if you think you're going to be behind schedule or if you're already on, or if you're behind schedule already. So another important tip and trick is you want to discuss your plan and strategies if you're falling behind schedule. What is a catch-up plan? And it's even better to have some foresight to avoid falling behind schedule and to discuss plans and strategies to maintain your schedule or to catch up or to speed up to make sure that you can meet your deadlines and your milestones. So another obvious, sort of kind of obvious thing is you want to keep a close eye on the critical path. You don't want have any surprises because if the critical path takes longer to complete, your whole entire project is going to take longer to complete. And obviously that's not going to be good. You're going to finish later than expected. So two other ones here is you don't want to start a Gantt chart with any Gantt chart software. It sounds sort of counterintuitive, but trust me, this will become more obvious when we work on our example. And the last one is you want to start at the end with the end goal in your mind. Don't look at the very first step. Imagine the final product and then work your way backwards all the way to the beginning. Doing it that way is a really better way of doing it. Since I used to do the first step and go forward to the last step, but after a while I realized that it's not really a mistake, but it's just more of a powerful technique of starting at the end and working your way backwards. That way you see the entire completed project. Now you might be wondering what are some advantages and disadvantages of having a Gantt chart. Let's go over some advantages. So this gives you a very high level view of all the tasks and how they're going to be structured and the ordering of operations and the timing, so how long everything is going to take. It's very important. It also tells you who is going to be doing what tasks. So that's also important. So resource allocation is another key thing because you have this high level view of your entire project. And it also helps because you can monitor your progress. So you know what's behind schedule, what's ahead of schedule, what's on schedule, how we're doing. That's very important. It can also help you figure out what's upcoming. Is it there a big deadline? Is there a milestone coming up soon? We should plan for that accordingly. And then if you show this Gantt chart to your teammates, you can have some good improved team communication and collaboration. You can say, here's our global schedule. This is where we are today. I need everyone to be working on their tasks so we can stay on schedule. So there's a lot of accountability there. Now, what are some disadvantages? Well, if you have a really large project, you're going to have a lot of tasks. It can be very complex to manage, and sometimes it can be difficult to read if you're going to be presenting this on slides. And of course, it can also be difficult to track your intermediate progress, sort of the day by day or the week by week project activities, because we just see it from a very high level. Unfortunately, a Gantt chart is static in nature. It doesn't change very easily. Once you make it, it's usually kind of set in stone, and we just let nature take its course. And it's also inflexible. So if there's some unexpected circumstance, like there's a big shipping delay, or there's a huge emergency, someone's going to be out for a long time, and they're a key member of some important tasks. You have to change your Gantt chart and make sure all the tasks still flow correctly, everything's going to finish on time. And so it's hard to incorporate and change everything when you have these unexpected and unfortunate circumstances. And finally, sometimes people have this tendency of, I just need to meet the deadline and that's it. And then because of that, the quality can slack or deteriorate, which is not good. Okay, so thanks for listening. That's the long story short.